excused absences. What?
He's getting it started.
Recording motion.
Oh, so good. Okay. It's now 6:30 and call to order. We're up to roll call and excuse absences.
Recording motion.
Okay. Got one. There's a little bit of a delay there. Web has to go for one. I'm sorry. And based on that, a moment of silence or invitation.
No, wait, too quick. So you have two people absent. You have Mr. Hendrick and Ms. Walker. They both sent an email, so they have to be an excused absence. So we need a motion in a second.
I make a motion to have an excused absence for Mr. Hendricks and Ms. Walker.
Okay.
second.
Motion, we have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No opposition. Now we continue. Okay, moment of silence, invocation. Ready? Pledge of allegiance. And move aside. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Under citizens be heard. This is the only time during the meeting that citizens are present. It's the opportunity for visitors and guests to address the committee on any issue, consent agenda items. All visitors wishing to speak must fill out and sign in roster prior to the start of the meeting. The meeting may not debate any non-agenda item nor may any action be taken on any non-agenda item issue at this time. However, the committee may present any factual response to items brought up by citizens. Very general opinion, JC 0169, limit 3 minutes each. All remarks should be addressed to the committee as a body and not to any individual member thereof. Public criticism of the committee or any action, policy, program, service provided by the city is not prohibited. However, any person making personal, impertinent, or slanderous remarks to individual members of the committee while addressing the committee may be requested to leave that meeting. I have more than 15 people in the room during this meeting and keep social distancing. The meeting is live streamed. Anyone would like to make comments on any matter regarding the city of Cibolo or an agenda item and this item read at the meeting, please email psimics@cibolotech.gov or text 210-514-3495 before 6 p.m. the day of the meeting. C, consent agenda.
No.
No?
I have to read a couple of citizens to be heard.
Oh, okay.
Okay, the first one is from Cindy Spencer. I'm gonna read this. It really pertains to a chapter later on in the charter, but we will read this and then we will read it again when we get to this chapter, just so that she'll know that we didn't forget it. We will reread it at the end when we get to that chapter. Okay, Cindy Spencer would like to recommend that citizens have a way to volunteer when their district representative does not like them as, it doesn't really make sense there, like them as, then there is no way to be on the commission. That's her email. Okay? And then I will read Sammy's even though it came in late. It's not everyone here, so I have to open it for someone else. Probably in after the sentence, so I don't see where it's sent. Hold on. Okay, this is from Sammy, and he would like to urge the council to move to revise Article 4, City Administration, Section 4.01, City Manager, Paragraph 1 of the Civil City Charter that calls that the city manager applicant to have previous experience as a city manager in order to qualify as such. I encourage the council to vote and it wouldn't be the council. I would encourage the commission to vote to remove this requirement, and then it would have to go to council. I believe that there are very likely several excellent citizens of our city of Troy who have experienced leading and managing large workforce with multiple departments involved in providing service, safety, administration, development, policy, and procedures. Strategic level to include fiscal responsibility. I believe it would be highly advantageous to the city to encourage folks with this level of management experience to apply for positions of city managers might not have previous city manager experience, instead of disqualifying this segment of our city population. It's been my experience when we seek ways to diversify through exclusion instead of dividing through exclusion. We only strengthen our ability to serve the greater good. Thank you for your time and consideration. Sam.
Well, I'm sorry, where specifically was that?
Very first time.
4.011.
It won't be going
About
to.
midway down that paragraph.
Okay, thank you. And when we come back to it.
Thank you, citizens, for writing in. That's helpful.
Agreed.
Now you're good, sir.
Okay, now can we go for consent items? All right, item A is approval of minutes of March 4th, 2021 meeting. And we all got a copy of it here.
I make a motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve. We have a second over here. A couple more seconds to think about it. Okay. Do we have a motion to approve?
Give a second.
We have a second already.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Not hearing any opposition, it's been approved. Discussion actions, review and discussion of current city charter chapters 4 through 6 if possible amendments. Now, you were calling up the numbers last time. Where are we now?
Yeah, so we're on section 4.01 city manager, going forward. We completed, the first paragraph is what the citizen has written in about, that we need to discuss. We need to go forward from there. So my question to the city attorney is this. After hearing what the citizen has written in about, does the city have to require previous experience as a city manager to apply to be a city manager with our city?
The way I read your charter, the answer to that is no. It specifically says shall have previous city manager or administrator or assistant city manager experience. Two of the three are definitely tied to a city manager or assistant city manager. Administrator, to me, is not tied to a city. It could be the CEO of Santikos, or it could be the CEO of USAA, or someone with administrator experience with USA. It doesn't have to be the CEO, but his position has been an administrative type position.
So let me ask you this, is this verbiage in this section too confusing for a person that's trying to apply for a city manager position? In the sense that, I'm not saying it's too confusing for any one individual, but in dealing with attorneys, you guys get really convoluted with your wording.
I didn't write this, but
So can we
here's
simplify this a little bit? Let's say that you don't have to have city manager experience.
well, in reading this, you read the whole sentence.
Mhm.
I could have worked at Dillard's and still apply if I had a degree in the field related to city government.
Right, it says and or relevant degree. So
So,
my degrees are in public relations, speech law. Those always fit into the other related field.
Okay, but does military have a degree?
Well,
Well, that comes under experience. Maybe what you're asking is that you put the previous administrator or city manager or assistant city manager experience. Because I think you're confusing administrator being one that has to be a city administrator.
I mean, that,
Right, so that's what I'm asking to clarify, because it's not that,
So if you put. the-
I go through these verbiage all the time, I'm sorry, Karen.
No, that's okay. So maybe if you just switch the words around so that you put administrator first. Or
At the end.
yeah,
During the
either-
beginning.
so that it's clear that administrator does not mean city administrator.
Yes, ma'am.
Or also put or related experience like they do on a lot of job descriptions.
Yes, ma'am.
Or
I
you have to realize too that the city council and your mayor can put other qualifications on the hiring of that city manager that's not in the charter too.
they can be more.
I think it might be more simplistic for, excuse me, the general public's interpretation of this would be to just simply remove the word shall and either
Agreed, shall have.
either delete shall in its entirety or use an alternate adjective that would be like, would recommend that they have. Shall is a limiting word and it can be also.
Yeah, but
would it make more sense then to remove shall and to have it more verbalized as to include but not limited to?
I think you just delete shall.
I kind of like having shall in there because it does mean you shall have either previous experience as a city manager, previous experience as a city manager, assistant city manager, or administrator and or a degree. I mean, the shall encompasses that. So I don't have a trouble reading. I think when you take it out, it opens it really wide.
dilutes it.
Yeah, it dilutes it
Dilutes
down and
the
then you can
experience
anyone
that
can
you
do
want this person to have.
We want a person
Shouldn't
that has.
we, but shouldn't we have the ability to hire whoever we want as a city? So as a city council, when you're talking about, you remove the word shall, then what you're specifically saying is that now everybody can apply. Well, everybody can apply anyways. That doesn't mean that's who the council's gonna hire, but by having the shall have limits them to who they can hire, in my opinion. So you know, if an applicant comes out of business school that's, I don't know, 36 years old, whatever the case may be, right now, I believe by this language, and that's why I was asking the attorney, this is limiting them as to who they can hire.
So,
No,
No.
I'm going to answer your question when you said someone coming out of business school. You would want someone as your city manager coming out of business.
That, I am not a council
Well, I
member and
would-
I don't
I
want to be
mean,
on
I
council,
think
but I believe they should be allowed to be interviewed.
Clear, this might
Any
add
more questions?
clarity, Mr., wait, let me just ask this question and see if this helps at all. Mr. Garza, if there were 20 attorneys sitting in this room, reading this particular verbiage, would there be 20 attorneys in agreement with you?
No.
But I have
I don't think
Right.
ever do
I will
that.
tell you that experienced city attorneys read charters all the time. You read personally, unless, I mean, this is a limiting as to who's eligible to apply. The citizens put this in. Now, whoever drafted it, and then the citizens did vote to put it in. I think, I like the idea of putting previous city manager, assistant city manager, or administrator experience, because I see the confusion when the administrator's in the middle. It implies that it's part of
City
the part of the city process.
Or so to put, or equivalent administrative experience.
I don't like.
I think if you said city manager or administrator, that would kind of lump the two of them together.
So clearly there was a citizen that did feel that it limited. So, and when I initially looked at it, I circled shall, and I was like, this is an uncomfortable word here. I definitely want qualifications, and I want the public to be able to express some semblance of those qualifications for their management leadership. Just don't, is there another word, perhaps, Mr. Garza, that you could recommend that, or just a sentence structure change?
It really depends on what this commission wants to recommend to the council. I've heard one individual say, I don't think we should limit it to city manager type experience. I think it should be anyone with supervisory administrator type experience that should be allowed to. Because I know some administrators who've never supervised one person. So, but in my opinion, if that person would be eligible to apply because they were classified as an administrator. Okay, and so it really just depends on, does this need to be reworked so it's clear that it's not just, not limiting to just city managers, city administrators, assistant city managers, or someone with a related city government degree, but it's really eligible to anyone who has supervisory administration type of experience. I mean, that's where, in my opinion, we're going right through the city manager process right now. You know, the situation, the consultants looked at the charter and have put out a profile. And the profile does talk about manager experience, city manager experience, or administrative type experience. It doesn't say must have worked in the city. So, you know, it really does open up, because that's the way they've interpreted, but with my system, but that's the way they interpreted it. But, you know, and so it really just, I can see the confusion where the citizen did think, well, it must be a city manager or city administrator or assistant city manager, so that's limiting. But when I read it, or administrator, it's really anyone. I mean, I have seen a retired general go and work as a city manager for a city, you know, because they had much, they ran an entire, you know,
Squadron.
Installations are big, or.
so, yeah. Oh, it's a lot different.
Yeah.
Yeah, people talk about it, you get people talking about it, but they don't talk about it.
Very different.
But I mean, but the bottom line is, I would have said that person's eligible to apply because they definitely have administrative
And I can tell
experience.
you, when we hired the city manager we have right now, we did two, and I know because I did the screening of everything. The first time, because we had to do 2 times, we had to go back out for more, because the council didn't accept anyone, so we had to go back out. The first time we got about 75 resumes, and probably 50% of those were never city managers or whatever. They interviewed, probably out of those 75, they interviewed 25 of them, and about 10 of them were not ever city managers or assistant city managers. They were either retired officers of the military, or they were leaders of a corporation, or like USAA or some type of large business. And that's who they interviewed the first go around. Second go around was the same way. So, so even when we did the hiring of Mr. Herrera, you know, most people did apply. I'd say majority of them were not city managers or assistant city managers. And the top two, one was a city manager and one wasn't.
So what if we change the wording to say have previous city manager, comma, assistant city manager, comma, administrator, comma, and or degree in a related field? And take out the field related to city government. Would that be less limiting? Because I think that the field related to city government kind of sandwiched that poor administrator position gets sandwiched in there between all the city stuff. And I think that's what's confusing citizens. The and or before a degree in field related to city government opens it up. Says you don't have to have this experience if you have a degree in this. It doesn't mean that that person's going to be like top tier candidate just because you have a degree in political science. It's not gonna make you bounce up above someone with 20
That's the way
years.
a lot of our federal jobs are.
Yeah.
It's like this, and then and/or degree in related.
Right,
The topic is or related experience.
related degree or experience. Yeah, that's how I got my job. I was a compliance monitor for a federal grant and my degrees are in public relations and speech comm. Those always fit in the other related field, but it doesn't necessarily prohibit me from applying. If that makes sense.
Here's my opinion, I guess in a nutshell. You know, and I'm not even saying Sammy should be a city manager or whatever it needs to be, obviously. I'm just trying to say that right now, you know, I hire a lot of people constantly. This is just from my own personal perspective. And I know that this is the Constitution of Cibolo. And these words mean a lot. So I would rather have Cibolo have the option of taking all the applicants they can get, and then read the resume and or decide whether they're going to interview them or not, versus, well, I have no city administration experience whatsoever, so I guess I'm not going to apply, even though I'm a general and I've run a brigade of.
But
The
that's.
charter doesn't require city management or city.
Right, that's what I'm saying. I just want to make sure that we're working on that wording. It's just.
Right, so what we've discussed is moving administrator to the end, because right now I think sandwiched between a city manager and assistant city manager, it makes it seem like a city administrator. So I think if we move that wording and then maybe take out a degree in city government or related to city government, I think that would make it a little more clear that you don't have to have city government experience to apply. We'll take anyone, but we also don't want to open it up to where city council is getting.
Yeah, because if you're already
Bombarded
getting
by-
7,500 applicants based on this definition, you open it up too wide and you're gonna get 300 applications and spend too much time reading junk.
I
Which is
have no
worse.
problem with the way it's written. This isn't gonna come into play in the selection of a new city manager anyway. This way, they'll have selected a new city manager before this ever takes place, if it's approved by the voters. I don't see no problem.
I think that the expression from the citizen to be heard is worth rearranging the order of those words. And or a degree in a field related. And taking out,
It's just the government.
In the city government.
yes.
Because
And so I think that would clarify for the general public, be more palatable for the general public saying, no, we want somebody with some good experience and an applicable degree. And so maybe that is just this simple language clarity that we could clean that up, and then it addresses the public's concern, because I know when I first read it, I was like, really, I can't hire anyone, and then I read it again. And so it took me a little bit, to kind of ascertain that, because of the, like, Mr. Garza said. I think it might serve the public.
If I hear you correctly, what you're saying is we can change it to educational qualifications and shall have previous city manager or assistant city manager or administrator experience or a degree in a related field. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
I agree with that.
Okay, so I have a question, Ben. You've got city manager or administrators, which is causing the problem. So then it goes assistant city manager or administrator. So all you're doing is moving it.
Right, so the implication isn't that administration, that experience has to be related to a city job.
Since it's right
It's
now,
any
in
type of
between two city.
Right, no, I'm just saying, does that confuse because it could be city manager or administrator.
I see what you're,
So-
I see what she's saying.
So to tag with that, then if we were to change that to previous city manager or assistant city manager or administrative experience As opposed to administrator experience, that brings it away from the city.
Administrative though could be a administrative assistant,
Not
secretary,
secretary, like.
not city secretary, that's
Not
different, they have their own section. But
Right, but I mean,
No, I agree with what you're saying. You're trying to say, put the administrator first. Is that what you're saying?
You gotta break it up from the city manager or assistant city manager, because it still shows the confusion.
If you
of
did,
either
if you
being a
did,
manager or an
if
administrator,
you do have previous city manager, comma, assistant city manager,
comma.
comma, or administrator experience.
Yes.
By saying or, you're but by saying those two together and then or.
That's
That
very
works.
clean. I think that language
So
cleans
say
it up.
that again.
Have previous city manager, comma, assistant city manager, comma, or administrator experience and or degree in a related field.
yeah,
I think that's a lot more clear, and it's not necessarily changing the meaning of what the sentence said, it's
Right.
just making it
Clear.
more clear.
now, but
And addressing them.
some
Right.
clarification on my part, when it comes to the verbiage that's in the council charter, the charter itself, is that regardless, this is what it says, but in any instance in which the city manager position opens up, they post it opening up, the city council is going to approve their own verbiage using this as a guideline.
That's
Right,
Correct.
so the city,
Okay.
they have to
So
meet
this
the
would,
city charter.
so this verbiage change will just open it up for them to go, okay, we can really
The
work
city,
with this.
they have the ability to add more.
Exactly,
We
Okay.
have to, so the charter sets the
Okay.
base guideline, they can be more stringent if they want, but they can't.
the
go to
minimums
charter.
on this.
Okay, do we have a motion?
I thought we were waiting to do motions until the end, no?
Well,
No, we were doing them as we went.
Yeah, we've been
Yeah.
going
Okay.
through. And we'll go through them again.
Then
Yeah.
I'll make a motion to change the language as Mr. Garza read, which was shall have previous city manager, comma, assistant city manager, comma, or administrative experience and or a degree in a field related to city. In a related field, thank you.
Administrative or administrative?
Administrator.
Administrator. And
I'm
that's-
sorry, did I say that wrong? My apologies, administrator.
And to clarify, that's to revise section 4.01 of.
Correct.
Yes.
4.1.
I second.
okay, we have a motion, we have a second, all in favor,
Please.
opposed? We have one in opposition.
Rebel.
Hey, he and I fought for years. Okay,
Cool.
next,
So then it's gonna be, 4.01, section 2, if anybody has anything to mention on that. Just the paragraph right below.
So I had a question about this. For the city manager, is that, like with the city of San Antonio, they have a set base salary, but it's not necessarily a contract position for the city of San Antonio, correct?
It is a contract.
It is a contract position, so do we have a set base salary
no,
or salary range, it's just set when they come in? Okay,
If you recall, that was done by petition so that the city manager's salary could not increase by more than 10% of the lowest, 10 times the lowest paid employee of the city.
okay, good. I also had another question, this may be later on with performance review, but it might go here too. I read in the personnel manual, and it may have changed since I read it, that the personnel performance pay cannot go above 2.5 or 3%. For their performance pay increase, but the city manager that year got more than what the base or
that's,
what the max was
it's,
That's further down.
in the
That's further
contract,
down.
okay.
that's part of the contract.
I would like to address that too, because I don't think it's fair that a city manager would get a higher increase than them.
You jumped around last time that everybody wants to just go.
It's-
No, that's fine, I just was talking about compensation, so I
Yes,
wasn't
ma'am.
sure if it fit here or somewhere else.
So there's no changes in that one?
In 4.0102.
Okay.
Mhm. 4.103, the city manager shall be appointed by and or removed by the discretion of the city council by the affirmation vote of a majority or a full membership of the city council. So, I guess a question that has come up is should it be a simple majority or a super majority? Because currently, I believe it's a super majority.
How do you mean?
Charter says by majority.
The majority would be
By
simple.
majority, so that's simple.
That's correct.
Okay.
Of the full membership, so if there's
So
only.
that's what I was asking for clarification on. Should it say simple or not?
No, to me, majority is majority. That's,
That's.
Okay.
Correct.
So my question would tie into city secretary. In the city secretary section, which we will get to in a minute, they talk about removing the city secretary by 3/4 majority.
Yep.
And that was changed in the last charter.
It seems very odd to have them be different for those two. Have you seen that in other cities or?
Well, it's, that, and that's what I was gonna say too, because the manager is majority for approval, 3/4 to remove, the secretary is 3/4 of both. The judge is a majority to approve and 3/4 to remove, the attorney is a majority for both. So
Okay,
why don't we have it the same for
It
all?
needs to be,
Makes
that's,
a little consistent.
okay, hold on,
Okay.
I'm sorry. We are in section 3, where it says the city manager shall be appointed by and may be removed at the discretion of the city council by the affirmative vote of a majority of the full membership of the city council. So to appoint and to remove is a majority.
correct.
Okay, and I'm sorry, you were saying that it was
Saying further down,
3/4.
it's gonna be different.
Yeah,
The wording's different, but we'll get to that, like.
Okay,
Well,
I got
but we need to
completely
talk about this
confused.
right now, because before we skip up until the other stuff, we need to agree upon simple or super, and how we define simple or super, in my opinion.
Well, the majority is a majority.
Well, that's the thing, is that this says the majority of the full membership, so if we say the full membership is 20 people, that majority is 11. If you only have 10 people there, you still need 11 votes to get the majority of the full membership, correct?
Correct.
Okay,
And so the full membership, voting members are 7. Correct. Does not vote. So it's a 4-3 vote to hire or fire the city manager.
or,
Well, this is, your charter is unique in having different levels. Most charter simply require simple majority if it's in their charter. If not, it's in the contract. Okay? Some cities don't include what it takes to hire or fire the city manager, but it's in the contract what it takes to fire the city manager. I will tell you, for general law cities, when you're firing for no cause, it requires a supermajority. Okay? They did that to try to avoid political back and forth. Most home rule cities, for their city manager, require simple majority for hiring and firing. Okay? The higher majority required for city secretary, it's probably because everybody loves Peggy.
Sorry, of course you do.
And I think her job.
She stated past, she stated a year past when she was.
Yeah, so, but I think, honestly, we all know in this room, the most powerful position besides the electeds is the city manager. And if the city manager is not working out, you don't want to require a supermajority if there's already 4 out of the 7 that don't want that person here. Because that leads to a non-productive environment. If you require a supermajority and you have a city manager says, well, you don't have, all you have is 4 votes, it's a majority, but you don't have I can tell you as a city attorney, majority is all you need, because under the state bar rules, if your client wants you out, that's a majority. Doesn't require a supermajority. I've seen some city attorneys require that in their contracts, and I'm sorry. When a majority doesn't want you, that's the client, you're gone. That's under the state bar rules. That's different. That's the city attorney. With regards to manager, city secretary, and municipal judge, that's really up to the commission and to the council what they would like to see in their charter. I think that if you try to change that to 3/4, council will not accept that.
No, I just would like it to be
I don't think it needs to be
consistent.
enforced, but the verbiage on the affirmative vote of majority. I don't know, we keep talking about simple or super, why not have that verbiage there and say it requires a simple majority.
To me, majority is simple.
Yeah.
I
Well,
don't,
that's to you, and you get 20 other attorneys in here, and you know.
no, none of them will disagree with that.
A majority is a
Majority,
majority of the seven.
And it also says majority of the vote.
Yeah.
Tell us there's seven, and you just need a majority, which breaks down to 4.
Which is 4.
Which would still be a majority, even if you only had 6 people show up. It would still have to be 4.
Correct.
Yes.
And you don't have 5 show up.
Still
It
got
would still have to be 4, so.
That's good for us.
So there's some protection in that.
Yeah. And then I think where you're talking about super majority, that is a 3/4 majority, and it is specified in here that it's 3/4. So that would be your we are designating it, just not with those terms.
But when it says full membership, all 7 of them have to be there.
Well, no.
No, you just have to
If
get
you
4.
only have 5 that show up, you still have to have 4 votes. That would be the majority of the full membership. Because I will tell you, I've seen where individuals try not to show up to the meeting to try to avoid the vote. So if 4 people show up, that's a quorum. And if all 4 vote for termination, that is the majority of the full member.
Since it's been brought up, just for my clarification, when we talk about 3/4 majority on a 7 vote panel, is that 6?
Oh, you're gonna make me do math?
Well, it's 5.25,
5 point, yeah.
5.25, so that round up,
It'd be 6.
okay.
Correct.
Fair.
Which is
We
a
need to-
super majority in a sense, and that's why I wanted to talk about that.
Well, that's 3/4. You're right, 3/4
Because
is super majority. In fact,
So when you talk about
I think-
5.4, I mean, it is a super majority vote.
whether it's 3/4, whether, if it says 2/3, if it says 3/4, to me, that's super majority. That's asking for more than a majority vote.
Okay. Next.
And again, that's a super majority vote, so, I mean, if that's what we want, then that's what it is. I just
So what
disagree
is
with it.
your view of a simple majority? What would a simple majority be out of 7?
Out of 7,
So what would
but if 2
super
people
majority
don't
be?
show up, then it's.
No, it's still out of the full
It's
membership.
the way it's worded, it says of the full membership.
No, you,
The full
well, 4
membership.
people only show up, 4 people can vote.
If it did not have
Full-
if it just said vote of majority of the city council and did not have the language of the full membership. And you had 5 council members show up for the meeting, it would just require 3 votes to terminate.
Do you want to change it from that?
We've been through this, haven't we?
I think it,
No, I just want I guess I want a clarification for myself and or the citizens that are listening, because I think that when it gets down to it, right now, you're talking about 5.4. I thought it was 5.2, but 5.4, that is a super majority.
It
We're
depends on how
talking
you
about
calculate.
6 people out of 7 voting members to remove a city manager or city secretary or attorney.
But right now, this says for a city
This
manager,
is
we
just
just
for
need
the
a
city
majority.
manager.
So
Of the full membership.
if it says that later on, then we'll have to amend it to make a match. I think that's also one of the concerns that a lot of people have about the charter is like one of y'all was saying. Some of it say remove by 3/4 and keep by, approved by a majority, and it's not consistent between
The verbiage.
positions. And it needs to be consistent, because otherwise we're gonna come up, hopefully not, we'll have to bring a staff member before council that they're trying to remove, and nobody's gonna know how to remove them because there's 50 different options in the charter, so clarification is. I think doing the majority of the full membership makes it pretty clear, whether you have 5 or 6 or 7 people show up, it's gonna be 4, even if it's just a simple majority. If you have 5 people show up, it's still gonna be 4. Makes it fairly, maybe. The next charter commission can be like, what did they do?
Conversation in a couple of paragraphs.
any questions on A and B subsections?
I mean, none for me.
Not for me.
I'll move on to section 4. Or subsection 4.
I'm completely fine with subsection 4, and then I'm gonna step out for the question.
Next is what is right.
In case of the absence, disability, or suspension of the city manager or city council may designate a qualified administrative officer of the city to perform the duties of the office or appoint an interim city manager.
When someone gets appointed as the interim city manager, do they qualify for any pay for taking on that position?
That's
Since
up
it
to-
is a contractor.
Yeah, that's usually interim, well, I've seen it done by way when someone, for example, right now in Rockwell, the city manager retired, and they appointed the assistant city manager as interim. There's no contract, they did not give her a contract, but they did give her a 5% pay increase while she serves as the city manager. And that's all they did, but it's only, and it clearly said the council action was it's temporary while you serve as city manager. I've seen other situations where cities do give an interim contract to someone who's appointed as an interim city manager. So it's really up to the council unless it's mandated somewhere.
And the way we've done it before, Katie, is every time we've had someone fill in, because we didn't have a city manager, for instance, when Bruce Pearson left, our former city manager before Mr. Romero. Our first interim was Chief Cox.
Mhm.
He was paid an interim amount as the city manager. When he was no longer there and Roger filled in as interim, and the fire chief got that interim pay. And the same thing with directors. If the director is gone, for instance, with Mark Luff left his position, and Kelsey Lee filled in for that, she got an interim pay until she was appointed as the director. And it happens, it's happened ever since I've been here. Like,
Perfect. I just wanted to make sure that they were being working for city government. Sometimes that doesn't happen.
So no reason to add anything or change to that.
No.
Where are we down to now?
Subsection 5, city manager shall.
Personally, I agree with all of these. I don't see any need or.
I had a question with D.
I have a question with D too.
It says attend all city council, commission and board meetings.
How can we-
That is a oppressively, there's a huge number of meetings to try to attend.
So you ask, tell me.
Oh, I know. I saw that all, and I was like, what in the world? So should we,
It's not uncommon, but it usually says city manager or designee. So that way you're always guaranteed that there will be somebody from city staff at all boards,
Okay.
commissions, and
I like that.
so I would recommend changing that to city manager or designee, because having anyone,
Would
if
that-
there's a section on that one.
But only for
It's
D, only for D, right? Not
There's
for
no
for-
changes in A, B, or C, anybody.
No,
No.
Okay,
So we're looking at D, and you have a motion for D?
Yes, I make a motion to amend D to
the
say
language for designee. But just for
Yes.
D,
just for D.
attend all city council, commission, and board meetings.
or does it?
I'll put together the language to make
Thank you.
it clear that designee, the city manager, what that for D.
I think it is.
And it's something anybody has to like vote on.
Yes, and just to say out loud, because I might forget, when we get to city secretary, if it's in there too, or any other position, I'd like to say or designee, because that's a lot.
We have
That's-
that last one.
Oh, okay, good,
Okay. We have-
Yeah, the city secretary or his
Yeah,
residence.
perfect.
But that's in, I mean, is there any major issue with including that as the same as how the city secretary is listed? Or should we?
We'll get there in a moment.
No, I mean, what I'm saying is the city secretary has it within the title as opposed to the city
No.
manager.
Because this says that the city manager shall appoint, suspend, and remove.
Oh, the designee can't do that.
No,
Understood.
but attending meetings, they'd be able to.
Okay, so we'll get that from
We've got a motion,
second.
all in favor?
I,
Aye.
To make a motion? Okay.
Ms. Katie.
thanks.
Anybody opposed? No opposition, thank you. Next,
I have a question about E.
Which one, E?
Yes, prepare and accept or designate an appropriate department head or city employee to prepare and accept items for inclusion. What does that imply that they control the agenda? That the city manager controls the agenda?
Did they gather the information for the agenda?
Or do they put any,
5D, sir. No, I'm sorry, 5E.
5E.
And 5D.
Items, prepare and accept items for inclusion doesn't mean they
So,
control it, they just take
You
it.
just get all the information and put it together.
so
I want-
department head, gets it together. And they send it to me.
Yeah.
And I put the agenda together.
Correct.
But
But
she
that's
also,
not,
because of council policy, council members and mayor are also allowed to add items to the
That's right.
agenda. So it's not, that provision does not limit others from being able to place items on the agenda.
It specifically says that they can
Plus-
appoint.
You wouldn't have a very long tenured city manager if he was preventing the council from placing items on the agenda.
As long as it's not
No, it does not, it's not. limited.
our elected officials, because of, he doesn't accept it.
oh, no,
You have to
that's,
accept.
they put agendas.
Or he or she
If
does
you
not
put an
accept it.
agenda and your name is beside it, that's who put that agenda on the monument.
I just wanted to make sure it wasn't a
so for the other non-council meetings. So it says the city manager shall prepare and accept or designate appropriate department head to prepare and accept the items for inclusion in the official agenda.
That's just, it says city council.
But it says and meetings of all boards and commissions.
And he doesn't do that.
But she's the designee,
So
designate an appropriate department head or city employee to prepare and accept. So that would be Peggy.
okay.
I could see why they have it under the manager to say that if you're going to be placing an item on there that his or her office would be aware. I could see that as a professional courtesy.
To be honest, like, he doesn't look at those agendas.
But another city manager
I
might.
just wanted to make sure. I'll be honest, he doesn't, he never has, no city manager ever has.
Yeah, that's what I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't saying that here's the thing, look at all of the
And
agendas.
he doesn't.
And it's like, there's no way.
It kind of seems like it would be something that you know, at least.
But your department head
Yeah, you're.
that's assigned to that commission should be reporting in staff meetings what the commissions are talking about.
Amen.
That's true. Are we okay with you
Sorry.
then?
Yeah, as long as it's not limited, that's fine.
Budgeting, financial reports. Inventories.
So in the prepare and recommend to the city council the annual budget and capital program and administrative budget as adopted by the city council. This is a very non-specific statement about the budget and how it gets appointed to city council. So who drives when the budget workshops occur, and how can we say there should be two, like, in my opinion, there should be a minimum of two public type of hearings for the budget presentation. And it should be done in a way that isn't the day before the budget's supposed to be approved.
That's in Article 7.
So are you talking about workshops? Is that what you're talking about, where the public is invited to the workshops that they have for the budget?
Yeah, yes.
Because they normally have 3 of those.
Yes, and so, so does the council drive that? Is that what?
Sometimes when they're held.
Okay,
If you were to look at Article 7, Section
okay, so we're,
5, that talks specifically on the public hearings.
okay, so. But the council, this is something that falls under council jurisdiction to tell them when to prepare it and recommend it and all that kind of, okay. All right, just making sure.
Anything else in this 5?
All right, so section 4.02, city secretary, Miss Peggy, you can leave the room or what?
No, no.
Just let me around.
Right, I know, I'm only speaking. My question in one is going back to the 3/4 majority of the city council. I think it needs to be in the same verbiage as we just agreed to previously. That's my opinion. I think it needs to be simplified. It's getting a little convoluted. As far as just majority or not majority.
So
Majority of the full council,
Mhm.
just same
Yep.
exact.
Same exact verbiage. I agree with that.
now, from a legal perspective, is there a particular reason for me requiring a quote unquote supermajority for the city secretary over the manager?
Yeah,
No,
why did we?
Okay.
like I said,
Didn't they try to do the 3/4 with the city manager and it didn't pass a vote?
This was on the last agenda, the
Okay.
last charter amendment. And it was both for two different items, the city manager and the city secretary. This was passed for the city secretary and it was not passed for the city manager. So, and that's why it's in there like this, because it went to the voters 2 years ago and this is what they did.
So the change of
For
your idea.
the voters, so again, going back to the voters don't understand 5.4% of the number. So that's why I love the words simple majority versus majority. But I would rather it be the same verbiage,
Yeah,
where it just says majority, I guess. And then, because of, when I said voters, I mean, I'm not discounting anybody, but we're getting in the weeds with some of this stuff, you know, 3/4 and this and the percentages and whatnot. I would like it to mirror all the way through.
I think
My
that the
opinion.
city manager went past and it been consistent, we wouldn't really be having this conversation, but because it didn't, it doesn't make sense to have it this way.
so that I move that we
Well,
amend.
hey, before we go,
Yeah.
into the- my personal opinion is that this was created by the previous charter. They worked on it, they developed this language and they sent it to the voters and this is passed. So I am, I'm disinclined to change it because I feel like the voters voted on it, they made, I don't know, I just, I get that you guys want uniformity, but there is an intent and purpose behind the city persons, voters, citizens choosing to put this language in for the city secretary. So I'm disinclined to just say, oh, well, we want to clean this language up and ignore the fact that this passed and the other section didn't. And that's powerful to me for the fact that that's the, the voters' voice, so.
And it was only 2 years ago.
I know, so
So I totally, I do understand what you're saying with that. My question is if there isn't a specific reason for having that 2/3 or the super, why?
the specific reason is because the voters spoke. And they said, this is how we want our charter to read. Less than 2 years ago, this went to the voters. It's something that I take very seriously, and it's not
No,
about.
and I can appreciate that, but the reasoning, my concern is the reasoning of saying we're keeping it this way because we're keeping it this way doesn't jive for me.
That's not what
I
I'm
mean,
saying, I'm specifically saying this was put on a ballot.
right,
Voters that came out to vote for this particular ballot chose this language for the city secretary and did not choose that language for the city manager. There was a reason behind what the voters' choices.
that's my question is, what was the reason? They voted on it, but what was the reason to vote on it?
When you look at what was on the ballot, I think the verbiage was different, Kara. So the
Was it
reality
that-
is the verbiage was different for the city manager versus the city secretary.
Mr. Hetzel was on that charter review.
Oh, yes.
Okay,
And the one before that.
please explain.
Part of what, you've got a couple of things. My personal opinion. Sometimes when there's voting going on dais, it becomes a. How should I phrase this, Peg?
That's why she put it to you.
I know. Well, what it boils down to is sometimes emotionalism, from my perspective, emotionalism gets the best of us. And that's one of the reasons why we were shot to the 3/4 is to make sure that you don't have something going off half cocked. Okay, now it didn't get approved on one end. That's the voter's choice at that point.
It keeps it from the bully pulpit. It keeps the secretary from the bully pulpit.
And that was the idea.
That makes
Whether or
sense.
not I agree with it, any given city manager really didn't have anything to do with the whole thing.
I honestly, it's not as something I feel really makes a difference because I think that the city secretary should be striving to have 100% satisfaction from her employer.
What should happen and what does happen though is different. We've been blessed with Peggy, but as we all know, she's trying to escape. And do we want to not only keep uniformity in the language, but also give our council a little bit more flexibility in addressing concerns with a city secretary?
No,
I think
I
that
think we
people-
give them less control over that, so
Yeah.
they have to work with her because God bless her heart, she's in the middle of a bunch of politicians who do not always behave well.
Right, but we also just discussed with the city
Or
manager.
his part.
Excuse me, collectively pronoun correct, whatever. The intent is to say that a city's secretary, regardless of their gender, is in a situation that is politically volatile. When I remember specifically voting for this, and I thought if they can't get their act together to get rid of their own secretary and put their differences aside enough to get their needs met by the person, then they deserve to not be able
Then
to.
why is this conversation the complete opposite of the conversation we just had about the city manager?
Because the city manager didn't pass.
No, but we were talking about, do we change it to a super majority, which would be 3/4, or do we keep it a simple majority? And so our conversation there was,
Opposite.
if the council of 4 members or majority of council can't support the city manager, then that's the majority of the client and the representative should be let go. We had that conversation that if a majority of council cannot support, get along with, doesn't like, whatever, the administrator or this person that's an appointee, or not appointee, but
An employee.
an employee, then how are they going to be sufficient? Everyone should get along. We should all have sunshines and rainbows and skittles and all sorts of fun stuff. But if they cannot, yeah, but if they can, yeah, it's real great.
I guess
But
it, for me, it really boils down to that way to vote. And I have a very, and that's how the voters said for the city manager, and that's how the voters said from my perspective, the difference between the city secretary and the city manager is vast.
And
And the level of what is taking place, it's a vast difference. This is a much, so to me, they're not apples and apples. You can't have that conversation with me in the same terms as apples and apples. Yes, they have the same cost, but the complexity of what they do is completely different.
I agree with listening to the voters. I agree with going with what the majority of citizens agree with. I think that we've had a few things that have been changed that contradicted what voters approved in the past. So that argument's kind of like moot.
No, because it's
But-
a consistency.
Right.
It's about being consistent with where my stance was
Right,
about the other thing that the voters approved my stance was that I was going to remain consistent with what the voters had approved.
Right.
And in this particular case, my stance is identically the same. I am choosing to continue to stay along the lines of what the voters have approved, consistent. Whether I agree or disagree is not a large, it's not a big factor. It's the fact that it went out, it got voted on, Mr. Hetzel's worked on it and some of it got changed by council and some of it But in the end, the voters said this, and so I try to consistently support that argument that we should be looking at what the voters voted.
I agree, and I appreciate that, because I feel the same way. I do feel that with this particular section, it was partnered with this city manager provision, or that was the intent of the previous charter review after watching the meetings, was that 3/4 was partnered with the city manager, and it was really more to try to get that city manager thing passed.
I can tell you that I can tell you, I know how I voted in this charter, right? And I can tell you that I voted the way this charter reads. So does that play into my influence? Well, probably, but the reality is there were a lot of like-minded folks like me. So
Mr. Garza, do you typically see in other charters the difference between removal of a city manager and a city secretary?
It's unique, but it's not out of the order.
Also question, with 3/4 vote, is there an easier way to phrase that? Because with out of 7, it's like a point, blah, blah, blah.
It just requires the city attorney to make math and require 6 votes, but like I said, it's unique to have differences, but now that Peggy explained it, that they both were on the ballot to change, one passed, one didn't. As they said, the voters are so. But that doesn't stop you from trying to make it consistent and requesting the voters revert it back, so it's really up.
So we have a motion at this point, or just let it go?
I'm okay with either way. I agree that we should listen to the voters. I'm a little conflicted on this one because I feel like I know the intent behind putting it on the ballot in the first place, and I don't think it was put on the ballot for the right reasons or for any kind of protection of the city secretary or to keep her in place, in order in place. I think it was put on there for a very specific reason, and the reason that it was put on there did not happen. It didn't fall through.
well, as a voter, I didn't know
It was
that.
to
Yeah.
make sure that the council as a whole agreed this needed to be done. It wasn't because, like I said, sometimes it's burning off into the sunset. And you need to take a deep breath, and sometimes that doesn't happen. And this was one way of keeping it to,
Does the city secretary also have a contract?
No,
no,
No, you're just a straight employee. For the city secretary or the city manager, are there mediation processes in place before it goes to a vote of council to remove? No?
But we also know from the previous charter that the council cannot control who the city manager hires or fires. They can just recommend investigations.
Right,
So we're talking about the future, not misspec.
right.
and I don't, the city council appoints, the mayor and city council appoints me, not the city manager.
So they would be able to remove her and the city manager, that's about it.
And the city attorney.
And the city
And
attorney and
the
the
city
judge.
attorney.
And you.
And the municipal.
Yeah, because we're gonna talk about.
And the
that.
board,
Yeah,
the members and the.
Right.
Those are
I hate to
the-
point at him, but yeah, we're gonna talk about that.
okay, so we're rolling on to the next one now.
So the question that comes to my mind is do we need to, do we want to treat each of these 4, manager, secretary, and or attorney as the same, equal level playing field, or as separate?
The mayor, or not the mayor, but the city manager has got a contract. Sure, he doesn't have a contract.
Right.
That's the big thing there. Once a year, they go through and that percentage, that's where that pops up off of that contract.
Sure. So
Realistically,
the manager has his contract, and that is, okay, that makes sense, that comes into play with the vote.
Yeah.
Okay.
realistically, are there city secretaries voted out often or removed often?
I can tell you lately, there has been.
Realistically, in your experience, are city secretaries a topic of removal often? Is this likely to happen
No.
or be an issue?
The bodies are very.
You know,
The only reason I'm concerned is because we do know Peggy's leaving and we don't know who's going to come in.
every city's different in the sense that I have seen some cities, the city secretary handles the minutes, handles the agendas, handles the elections, and that's it. I've seen other city secretaries, a lot like Peggy, that handles a lot more than that limited. She's also overseeing the court, you know, a few things and so forth. So it just depends on each city. I actually have a city where the city secretary is the city manager. They don't have a city manager position. The city secretary runs the day to day in addition to agendas and elections. And so it just really depends. Again, like I said, it's usually consistent, but it takes to hire and fire folks. But I understand why yours is different, just like I now understand why y'all have single member districts. You know, because it's just different. Each city is going to.
Does the city secretary follow an HR, the city's HR, where you'd have like a 6 month, if you're a new employee, you'd have like a 6 month probation.
That's true. But not every city works for the city council. That's kind of divided in the state of Texas. Half the city secretaries work for the mayor and city council, another half of them work for the city manager. So
Okay.
it's different in every city, so.
Okay, so I want to ask, is that still, the last charter review, you had brought up about wanting to change that so that you were working for the city manager?
No, I didn't want to change that, someone else.
Oh, somebody wanted to
Yeah.
change it.
I think I like working for the mayor and city council, and I think there's a reason for that, you know, and I think.
I would not want my city secretary to report to the city manager.
There's too much.
I would not, I would.
Okay, so, well, my question is, last time we had posed the question to you, is there anything in here that we need to change for whoever takes your place?
I think so.
When she talks about overall, right?
If you look at number 2, the last sentence. Secretary shall report administrative to the manager for every removed office owned by the council.
Yes, I have that down too.
And I see a lot of charters that have that, but it says may be removed or disciplined only by the council.
That's what it means to be.
Yes.
Because for administrative purposes, days off, vacation days, sick leave, things like that, that's controlled by the city manager, you know, and so forth. But if the council is the only one that can remove the city secretary, in my opinion, then the city council should be the only one that has the ability to discipline the city secretary.
Yes.
Agreed.
And with right now, the way it's written administratively, everyone in the room can argue, well, administratively, that means discipline is included in that. And in my opinion, it shouldn't be, because if only the council can remove them, then in my opinion, only the council can discipline the city secretary.
I agree. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, I actually have that. This is a conflict of interest and confidentiality.
But before we go there, is there a reason why we don't have qualifications listed? I understand the specific qualification.
I don't think the city charter requires the city secretary to be a certified city secretary in our charter.
Okay.
Even a lot of cities do have it in their charter that they require them to become or to be certified city secretaries or become certified city secretaries within 3 years or 4 years of being appointed. It's a long process to become a certified city secretary, minimum of 3 years. Can take longer than that, depending upon the person. And then you have to be recertified every 4 years. Takes a lot of CP hours and courses that you have to attend.
Would you recommend we add it?
It's a good idea. I believe as your city gets larger, as most cities are now, and as you've got larger years since I've been here, a certified city secretary has a lot more knowledge than somebody that, let's say, I'll take my sister right now. She's going through the certification process. She's brand new. And the only reason I stay is to get her to an election, because she has no idea what to do with an election or anything to do with most. That's why I'm trying to train her each step of the way. but a certified city secretary is already gonna know those things. You know, so I think it's important in the future, your assistant doesn't necessarily need to be a certified city secretary as long as she's working toward that. But I think a person that replaces me needs to be a certified city secretary.
I think so too.
So within this type of thing though, that is something that the city council can put in place on their posting, correct?
Right, because it does say the council shall hire the city secretary.
So the questions I have on that is within the charter itself, would it be better work to limit the council or to force the hand?
I think if you put in there that she has to be, or he has to be certified, then that's who they have to hire, am I right?
They would have to have
They would
That's
certified,
that becomes part of the requirements.
Yeah.
So,
just for the city secretary, not.
Yes, just that position,
right, I mean,
not the assistant. I think the city secretary is a huge responsibility. I think it requires a lot of knowledge, and the fact that Peggy felt she couldn't step down really kind of exemplifies that. And I don't think there's any harm in saying that if you're going to be the city secretary, especially as we grow, that you need to be a certified city secretary.
I mean, you're gonna I don't see any problem with having the city council put that in the posting for the position, but to require the charter to force the hand of it, I think might be too much. I mean, not knowing what the pool of qualified, certified, city, secretary,
Yeah, just
Cool,
within,
people
be
are-
certified within 3 or
Yeah,
4
you have 3
years.
years to get that, so.
right?
I just feel like if it's the city secretary, I do feel like that is a big, well, I think I think it should be a requirement.
Is that a standard certification like through the state or through the
It's
federal?
done through,
Everything across the board.
yeah.
So you say it takes 3 hours to get the certificate?
Minimum of 3 hours, 3 years.
Sorry.
Minimum of 3 years. Most people cannot get it in 3 years because you can't take all the courses that are required to take within that 3 years. So I got certified in 4 years, which most people it could take 5. Some people take 15 years to get certified because the city can't afford to get them certified. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of, the city of Civil has not had a problem in getting myself certified, or Amanda, when she was my assistant, getting certified, or getting, an individual certified. We put it in the budget and make sure that they have the opportunity to attend those classes. And right now it's easier because it's done by Zoom and we don't travel. So it's even better, but that's not gonna go on forever. But,
So then if we said certification within 7 years, something like that?
No, I think to be able to apply for the secretary, you should be certified. For the assistant, you can work on that certification.
That would really limit our pool.
That means we're getting qualified people.
We'd be poaching from other cities.
That's my concern is,
I know City of Shirts just hired somebody as an assistant that's a certified city secretary.
I think they're out there, and I mean,
There's a lot of them out there. I already know that there's gonna be at least 6 city secretaries in the area from Pleasanton to Austin that's going to be applying for my job.
and they're all certified.
And we're all certified.
There it is.
I
I already know
mean,
that.
the council,
But it's
in my
something
opinion, yeah, the council is going to require
Yeah.
certification if they take Peggy's recommendation.
yeah,
And so I don't know if it's needed in the charter, but it's up to you. I mean,
It isn't
I
a
think
job
it's-
description, I'll tell you, I wrote a job description, I also have an exit plan that I've given to the city council, the mayor, for the last few years. So they have my exit plan that does say that, that it should be a certified city secretary, so.
I think at that level, the fact that, the council's looking at that as a moot point that.
I don't think it needs to be in the charter personally.
Right.
I think with your exit strategy, your exit plan, that does not need to necessarily be in the charter today.
No.
Because we don't know, I mean, goodness gracious, we just went through COVID last year. We don't even know what's gonna happen in the next 2 or 3 years. To be able to have somebody to apply, I mean, we could go through 2 or 3 people and all of a sudden, I just don't wanna limit it. Because I mean, this is the Constitution of civil, in my opinion, that's how I
It is.
describe it. And if this is the Constitution, we're talking about writing something that is, you can't go outside of this. So as much as we try to limit this box or not limit this box, that's what we kind of have to live by.
Yeah, but
I don't
this
think
is
it
gonna
needs to
last-
be added at this time, my personal opinion.
But this is gonna last a few years, so what happens if her replacement leaves in 2 years?
We have a
nothing's-
larger amount of applicants than we can.
How do you know that? I mean, that's the same.
Well, because
it's the same.
if you require them to have a degree in this, they have to have a degree. So, if I'm hiring people and I say you have to have a college education, and that's in my constitution of my requirements, we can't deviate from that.
I think we get
So
the best.
we can't adjust, we can't be fluid, we can't be agile.
And I think it's okay not to be on certain things, and I feel like this is a job that comes with a lot of responsibility and a lot of requirements, and I think there's nothing wrong with saying, if you want to apply for the city civil secretary position, you need to be a certified city secretary.
Which is
We
really,
we highly recommend that you
Yeah.
have a certification.
which is what the city council is doing and planning on doing. I mean, but do we really
But
have
they're
to?
planning on, so what if they change their mind?
And in 2 years from now, I mean, we're gonna be in the same boat. We don't have somebody who's certified if somebody leaves in 2 years.
And if, let's say, God forbid, the same sort of
So-
scenario, we don't have a pool of certified applicants left,
But I
Well,
think there will be.
and Valerie's.
I would love that.
I mean,
Valerie would stay because she can't leave because we don't have anybody certified.
Right,
Ms. Peggy, is your assistant right now certified?
No,
But
Okay,
she's working on
She's
it.
still
She's
there.
working on it.
and she will not be certified when I leave here.
but do you feel that she's a great?
Because otherwise I'll be here the
I
whole
understand, but
year.
you, but you
Right,
still,
so
you
you're
still
fine.
feel she's a great person
But she does.
eventually in that role.
When she
so,
gets her certification.
so I don't wanna talk about individual personnel
I know.
matters at this table.
Okay.
I'm not comfortable with that, but I think one of the things that this is really a challenge for me because I completely hear the level of qualifications that we're saying, this is what we as citizens want. But I also have been in situations where, and you know that this is the right candidate, but they don't maybe have all of the boxes checked for you. And,
we need to be able to have that kind of wiggle room to.
Really, you don't know, but I feel like you don't know someone's a perfect candidate until they're working and they're in place and they're doing what they're doing. And so for us to set a requirement, just like for the city manager, you have to have a certain amount of experience. I think that the city secretary should also have a certification that many secretaries across the nation have. And like she said, there are a ton of certified secretaries that will be trying to get this position. It's not like there's a shortage. It's not like we're not gonna have candidates. We are gonna have candidates. I think by putting it in there, the council say that now, what if they change their mind next year? What if they say, you know, we don't want it to be that way?
So normal, a lot of times what happens, to be honest, is you have a lot of assistant city secretaries that are out there in the state of Texas that are assistant city secretaries, and they look for those city secretary jobs that come open for them to apply for, and that happens a lot. Because they've got experience, but they're not gonna get that secretary job right now because they've got a certified city secretary. And those people will apply, you'll see those all the time. But, the council has the ability to make sure that the city secretary is certified. So it doesn't necessarily need to be in the city charter. I don't think it really necessarily has to be there. I think the city council the city council is the person that hires them. And I think that the city council, I think they understand that the city secretary has to have certain that they are responsible, especially for elections and agendas and meetings and stuff. And I think they're very well aware that take certain people to be able to do that, and I think they're going to utilize that knowledge, every time they have to hire a city secretary. So
I
does
agree
it
with
need
you,
to
Ms.
be
Becky.
in the charter? Not necessarily. I think that the citizens of Central elect those council members and the mayor and the council, and I think that they have to think that those people are going to do the right thing and hire the right people.
I agree with you.
I mean, but you guys have to do what you decide what's right, you know.
We still need to go back to, the 3/4 or not. So, in my particular opinion, I'm also agreeing with Ms. Peggy that we talked about this originally in the very first meeting, that we want to keep the stuff limited that we put on the ballot, because it's gonna confuse everything else.
Too much.
And this may not be something that we need to do right now, even though we all here feel that it's gonna simplify it for the future.
We're back on to section 14.
Yeah, because
section
we
1.
skipped,
I
so.
thought we were done,
about-
I thought we were.
No, we have not made a motion on that or voted on that. But. the
I thought we were gonna
3/4
leave it as
majority of
I thought we were
the-
gonna leave it as is.
Okay,
I thought
Well, let's
we
then
were-
make it official. Does
We haven't
anyone
made
make a
that
motion?
official.
I mean, does it need a motion? to-
I'm
No.
fine with leaving it the way it
So,
is.
yeah,
However-
we're all-
Let's
Okay.
just make sure that we all agree.
Yeah, we all kind of agreed that, but
Okay.
I do want to address what, Mr. Garza did bring up, because that is a change.
With,
And that was in the
Subsection
paragraph 2.
yes,
The city secretary shall report administratively to the city manager, but may be removed from office.
or discipline.
Okay. So, or disciplined only by the
So-
council.
Okay.
So I would like to make the motion to add the word or discipline
may I
to that sentence.
specifically where you want to put?
He told me to add or discipline.
Right, but before or
May be removed
after?
from office or discipline only by the council.
You guys
I mean,
select
doesn't
remove
mean if it's one side or the other.
Discipline.
Same.
Discipline or remove, we could do either way.
Yeah, that also doesn't have to be,
Yeah, discipline
This one
or
or
remove.
remove.
Yeah, I like that better.
So vice versa.
I make a motion that it says discipline or remove by office only by.
I
council.
second.
We have a second.
You said you did, you jumped
I
up.
second.
Second, all in favor?
Wait, who motioned it?
Sarah,
Larry
the
and Katie.
There you
I'm
go.
gonna move one of them the other side pretty soon.
We're the troublemakers.
I'm sorry, my shoulders.
I know, keep trying.
Uh,
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone in opposition? Okay. Next. Very soon.
we're looking at subsection 3 on the idea that the city secretary of his / her designee shall. Any, what are your thoughts on any of those letters?
Oh, back up just a second to H.
Ooh,
H on section 4.02.
oh,
Kara had a note in here. She ran to the bathroom.
H,
H,
you mean,
sub,
From
bullet H, the
So
city
we have, we're just
secretary.
looking at all of those right now. Right?
that's where we're
We
at.
have-
Oh, never mind, I thought we moved to.
I was like,
But she's
Never
gone, so
mind,
let's go
ignore
by
me.
it, huh?
No, okay.
Hold on a second, what H?
Okay.
There's only one H. Your team marked it down for the schedule and oversee all the elections. Is that what the chief's marked?
Yes.
Okay. Schedule and oversee all state elections in accordance with the Texas election code. And the other. Does she have notes on that or should we ask?
Just on H, yes.
What is it
But
say?
are we good with the rest of them? We can continue down. I'm sorry, I jumped ahead. I thought we were.
I'm personally good with the rest of them, and I'm curious to see what she has to say.
Yes, oh, she's back.
Uh-oh.
Did somebody steal my jelly beans?
No, I should have.
I ate them all.
If it was like,
Thank you. No, I jumped ahead, so
What?
I didn't need to. I thought you were, no, I thought we were down here.
fine.
We're up here somewhere.
So, page 3, subsection, Article 4, section 2, subsection 3.
The duties.
Right.
Responsibilities.
It appears we're down to letter H. Good, do you have any concerns or questions on H?
Budget for these elections to council
No.
prior. Okay, so,
What do you, H is she on?
You said budget, budget's not that.
hang
No, it's
on,
not on it.
hang on, Stevie. Hang on. I've got, a concern where it says, schedule and oversee all city elections in accordance with the Texas Election Code and any other applicable law.
Okay.
So part of our, if we don't go back to open districts, part of, I think we need to have it in the charter is that we budget for these elections. If we stay in
We budget for it now. I budget for city elections every year.
That's a year you don't have.
the demography.
Demographer,
Yeah, the demographer is the only thing that, I think that is what specifically I am talking about, that if we go all at large, this is the main point. Okay, so if it passes through, that's one thing, but if we don't, then I want in the charter that the demographer, somehow, we can't just wait until.
What does that?
But the budget worked out before this.
This is,
Yeah, I don't know how to explain it exactly, Ms. Peggy might be able to assist me with it a little bit, but in this last budget meeting, cycle last year, we needed have a demographer do all of the things that they do. There was different numbers given for what that demography was. Then nobody came back and explained how, they said, oh, we're gonna do it with the school district, or oh, we're gonna do it with the census, or we're gonna do it. And Ms. Simic said to me when I asked her that it has to be done a specific way by a certified type of demographer specifically for this. So if this is truthfully the case, the city secretary, obviously, because she doesn't set that budget, is set behind or could look not, preparing for our elections if we don't at least address that in some way to say the demography will be done every 3 years. Like, we don't have to necessarily say the budget for the demography, or the demography will be done as required by, what's the statute for it, 3 years or,
if the demographer, the reason why we need to have a demographer done now is because our districts are out of whack. And you can't be out of sync.
But there's a kickoff. There's like a button that or there's an alarm that says, okay, ball dropped. We now need a demographer. When that ball drops, the demography, it became a political point of contention, and it got pushed over here, it got pushed over there, it got pushed over here. I just wanted to say in our language, when the election law requires the demographer to be done, that the city secretary will present that to the council and it will be addressed in 3 days or 2 days or 1 hour or whatever. Yeah.
what do you got?
They could fall under Article 5, the election. Read that. Just saying.
Well, the city attorney, the city secretary rather, excuse me, she is the one that has to determine that, right, Ms. Simmons?
Well, the districts, it's really determined by the population of the city and where the population is going. So we know, if you look at the map of the city of Sidwell, and if you looked at it over the last few years, you saw where the majority of the population went into either District 4 or District 7. And so none of those other districts, pretty much District 5, changed
Five.
off. Those are the only 3. Others are some landlocked. District 5 is landlocked, no, District 4 is landlocked, District 1 is definitely landlocked up there now. And so District 3, they're not gonna change. So when you're adding all that population now to those other districts, that made it where our districts are no longer, there are some districts that are almost two times the amount of another district.
So who is the authority within our elections for the city? Who is the authority, the button that pushes that says, this is wrong, this is out of whack, this needs to be, we are no longer in compliance?
So we usually look at that, Mrs. Lattimore, when we do our census, is when it's normally looked at.
Every 10
Now,
years.
when we looked at it 2 years ago, was it 2 years ago we did census? Every 2 years? Every 10 years. When we looked at it last time, I mean, that's what we haven't done another demographer since we.
Not everything is done.
Since we did, when we went. to
Are we in
districts
compliance with the state election laws?
With the,
The issue of equal districts is not a state law.
no,
It's the US Constitution, which basically one person, one vote. When you have districts that are overpopulated, the courts have said when you have districts that are overpopulated, compared to districts that are underpopulated, overpopulated districts don't have one person, one vote. Problem is that a few years ago, the Supreme Court overturned many of the provisions of the Voting Rights Act, which enforced the redistricting provisions. So while the courts have not had a recent case on redistricting, I think eventually if cities, counties, school districts don't redistrict, and because of the population, I think it will go to court, and then eventually we'll have to come back in compliance.
now, we do have it's going to be in our budget for this coming year to redistrict.
Well, I want it in the laws of our city that we will comply with the election law requirements. We cannot allow persons' votes to not be, there has to be a simple language or a simple mechanism that kicks you into making those changes. And there has to be, and you're saying it is the number of persons in a district, then at least let us assign that responsibility and that obligation to us as citizens in the charter to say, we are going to follow the laws of the election of the Constitution of the state of Texas.
But if we're at large, that becomes.
Mute, correct.
Yeah.
If we get to that.
But even-
So we're, right now, we are making an assumption that we are or are not, we don't know. But right now, in our charter, we are districts. If that passes and we don't put some kind of language in there that says that we're going to, it can be simple, clean language that says the city secretary is by law responsible to ensure that our elections and the district breakdown abides by the state law.
I mean, we have that when we say that.
Very sensitive.
Isn't that exactly?
It does. I didn't see it. I'm sorry, Mr.
Isn't that what you're looking at, he's looking at that same number 8 schedule over all city elections. And according to the Texas Election Code and other applicable laws, so that last 4 words covers everything else. Really elegantly and simple.
And it would, I don't see where you need to change that. It was brought up. I mean, I can't force the council. to do
I know, that's what I'm worried about.
But based on the way that you just,
I don't like what council's response to her was.
Well, that's, we can't control the council. We're, the charter is the way it is. We have it set up, it's there. If
They just kicked the can down the road. They didn't address it. And then we're gonna be found in violation.
yeah, but if, based on the way that you just, maybe some more clarification needs to go with your sentence. The requirement to do a demography will be could be every year,
Yes.
and we don't wanna have to pay for that every year.
No, I don't wanna have to pay for it. I wanna make sure that when we're not in
Yeah, but
compliance,
if you could be.
and this civic says we're not in compliance, the council has to,
Let's
But-
try this one on precise. When they ran the 2010 census, it was all through our, right? We were off 2,000 to 3,000 people.
Well, you're allowed to be off a certain
By
amount when you do
within 5%.
within 5%. We were
Yeah.
within 5% of our
But the fact was,
budget when we were,
when we, because we did go to districts, we had to take a look at that. Just because we had the district set up that way. And we go to that large, it's always going to be about the entire thing. So it's driven right now.
Well, we aren't waiting for the.
There's a-
I guess nobody else is
Already says we
worked up
follow-
about it. I mean, it's a big building. I don't think our elected officials are highly motivated to ensure compliance with the election law. I heard what Ms. Simic said. I saw what they did, how they, and I don't think that that's
I think
in the
that
best
comes,
interest of us as the voters and, you know.
I think that comes back to then making sure we elect the city council members who are going to fulfill those duties.
Right,
As
but
opposed to forcing the hand with more.
Look, there's one, I don't like to over legislate, but there is one thing that is very important to me, and that is making sure that the voters in our city have access to and the correct voice, that we don't have, like Mr. Garza said, that we all have that one voice, and if we're not in compliance, that it is a priority enough for us to have put it in our charter. But that's-
so what I'm hearing your concern is that the city secretary was trying to follow the rules
And
And
people
it
I like and
was-
respect,
and the council decided to kick it down the road instead of addressing it. And you would like to put something in the charter, whether here or in the appropriate area, possibly here, that
I think it's.
that would give the city secretary in the future more teeth or more ground to stand on and say, look, it's in our charter, you're required to do it. Because
Isn't that what-
apparently it being in state law is not enough.
But if the
There are
state law
some
isn't
things-
enough, then I don't think the charter will be enough either. If they're not gonna follow, this clearly says with the Texas election code and any other applicable law, and if they're gonna ignore that, having another bullet in here.
Would adding the word including a demographer or something, I can't think of the word, I want to say district, but
I mean,
including,
honestly, I've never seen it in another charter.
you haven't, okay.
I mean, it's.
I mean, you're
I would-
right. it
I
should
would,
be-
I would say, I would have told you 10 years ago that that the Justice Department would enforce redistricting to make sure your districts are in compliance. But because of the 5-4 decision by the Supreme Court that basically took away a lot of the Justice Department's authority with regards to voting rights and redistricting. I'm curious, and this is the first census since that occurred by the Supreme Court. So I am very curious to see how cities respond and whether or not they're going to comply with the US Constitution, since the Voting Rights Act doesn't have the authority to force. Now, we have a new administration that might try to change that. I don't know. You know, I've heard of the John Lewis Voting Rights Act reinstatement. If that's done, I don't know. It's going to be a battle whether or not, but it will require some changes. But
I just,
as the city attorney, if we still had single member districts, I would be recommending to the council that for their legal sake, they need to go through the redistricting process because their districts are way off balance.
and to be honest with you, it's gonna be, I'm putting it in the budget. If they approve the budget or not, it's gonna be in my budget for democracy for this year. And you know, for this next year, and that budget's coming up, and anybody has a right to attend those meetings and give their opinion on it.
I just see the slippery slope. I see the slippery slope created from the ruling, and like he said, it'll be interesting to see what cities do. I'll always advocate to try to promote voter rights. I'm always gonna be here to try to promote voter education and voter participation. And I see this as a slippery slope. And you're right, I might, just be throwing my hands up and say, I'm not gonna care because it says this word in the charter, but in my heart of hearts, I know that that's the backbone of who we are as a community, is how we vote. And if we change districts or we don't, if we fail with the open districts, then we've got to address it. I mean, I'm not gonna get off that drum, but I don't have to take up any more of your time tonight.
Ms. Peggy, with the demographer, and maybe Mr. Garza can answer this too. We discussed how the census was going to be delayed. And
Yes.
it's all gonna be probably
Yeah.
later, so we won't be doing the demographer till later.
Yeah.
So my concern is,
We're not
so will
doing it.
this, are we anticipating this going into effect or the demographer happening after November?
Oh, definitely,
Okay,
because we're not gonna get the census now until September.
Until September.
okay. But my concern is we're proposing to go at large, but if that fails, then we will have districts, and I wanna make sure
So
that we're not doing the demographer before that
No,
happens, so we're not
it's gonna
shorting
be put
ourselves.
into the new budget for next year, which goes into effect on October. Of course, remember, we're working that budget now, so we need to put that money into the budget right now
Perfect.
when we start doing it, so that it's in there in case we still have districts and we still need to make sure that that demographer is done.
Perfect.
So-
That's exactly, I was just trying to think long-term, like the implications and such, so, good.
I just
We're
have
covered.
one thing, guys, we really need to get through this chapter, chapter 4, so we can, we're not gonna finish 5 and 6, but we will,
Well, I'm sorry to take your time.
No, this is important, we have to do this. So if we have to add more meetings, we'll have to add more meetings. Well.
We'll bring pizza.
So much
When
in
it comes to
budget.
section 4.03, 4.04, now that we talked about a lot of stuff that I would have had concerns about, I'm actually completely fine with the rest of 4. I took a lot of notes before we got to this meeting, we talked about this on the 3/4 versus the affirmative majority and all that stuff.
So is there,
I'm completely fine with the rest of chapter 4. That's up to y'all. I'm completely fine with it, because I've read it more than once.
Has anybody, you got something else?
Yeah, I wanted
Let's
the
try
terms.
I have a question about number 2.
Where,
Number 2 for.
4.032. Okay, so it says, okay, in the event a duly qualified attorney is not available, the city council shall then select a qualified.
oh, it is.
Wait a minute, wrong one. Okay, so the municipal judges of the municipal court shall be appointed to a term of 2 years, which coincides with the mayor, and may be appointed to additional consecutive terms upon completion of their terms. And the appointment of the municipal judge may be terminated at that cause. So,
We had to change the duration.
right, but,
I don't think you can.
Check on something.
I think state law limits,
So then you have to
Yes,
change the wording, so
Yeah, I
it's
think
not
so,
with the
yeah.
mayor.
state law, I believe limits, terms for municipal judges 2 years.
okay,
Where you have
So
to,
can we
and
just-
so then you have to
After
take
that.
away the election of the mayor and it's just re-elect every 2 years. Because the mayor's not elected every 2 years, so.
Government Code,
Okay,
chapter
yeah.
29, municipal courts, judge municipal court serves for a term of office of 2 years unless the municipality provides a longer term.
Okay, so we can.
Pursuant of Article 6, Section 11, that's the constitution.
So the city could change it to 3 years. So that it's corresponding with me.
I think it'd be.
so what happens if this person leaves in the middle of those 3 years?
We have an alternate judge.
Okay,
And he's been sworn in at the same time as our other judge. It's Judge Jacobson.
okay.
Well, Judge Phillips is our regular judge, and Judge Jacobson is our alternate.
Okay, and then, so the term would still coincide with the mayor's. Okay, and so then what's the difference between a duly qualified and a qualified?
No difference.
Okay.
That's
It's
a
not-
great question. I think we all just pretended we did.
And this section has never been changed since the original charter.
No.
So we are updating
No, I read it
section
and just thought, hey.
We have
Section 403,
4.032.
subsection 2 to state
3 years.
3 years, which shall coincide, so everything else is the same, but the number.
Okay,
So you're gonna fix that
We
one.
need a motion.
I move,
Yes.
Does this need to be voted on by the voters?
Yes.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
second.
so I move the point to a term of 3 years remaining of the verbiage.
I second.
We have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No opposition passes.
Okay, and then in number 3, the failure to appoint a municipal judge, the mayor becomes the judge.
It says
So then they don't have to meet any of the qualifications that are in 2.
Well, it says in there that if you can't find an attorney,
Yeah.
then they can have, they can just.
I will say that will not
appoint
happen.
one person.
Isn't it more or less?
I think that's like,
So,
maybe if there's a Thanos comes and everyone like turns into dust.
Oh,
The
yeah.
mayor can step in for a minute until we can find someone else.
Quit
We just
speeding
want
the
to-
time.
Okay, those are my only.
Any major concern or any specific concerns on city attorney?
Hey, hey, what's that?
Lose as affirmative vote.
Just one idea, it's-
So should the last line of number 1 say that they are a member of the State Bar of Texas in good standing?
Isn't that the same thing? Or it implies?
Well, you can be a member, but if your license is suspended, it's suspended.
You're still a member.
But it does say duly qualified licensed and practicing attorney, so
so
I
there
think
you go.
it's covered.
It's all there.
Okay.
Where does the money go that you get from municipal court?
Okay, so some of it goes to the state. So we
The
have,
majority goes to the state.
yeah,
To be nice.
if you look at our agenda, sometimes you go online and where it has the court every month. There's a court, every department, you'll look at that. If you look at that, it will tell you how much money was received by court and how much money went to state, how much came to the city, you know?
I'm gonna definitely.
So we just, had a court, but we only saw 23 cases, so we don't have many cases coming to our
From
court
this week or the month?
for this month. So 23 cases, that's it.
Okay, so we're clear pretty much all the way down.
Section 5, administration.
Well, hold on, I have a question about, still in section 4 for the city attorney. Everyone else said a full city council, but this one does not. It just says the city council may be removed without cause by the affirmative vote of a majority of the city council.
Wait, what number? Sorry.
6,
Oh, there it is. Thank you. Affirmative vote.
is it okay? Because the other ones have to be a majority. It has to be a majority of the full city council, but this one does not.
Well, this goes back to saying exactly what we already agreed to on the city manager.
No, but, and the city manager, it says full membership. This does not, that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Well, it doesn't, I think the difference in that, and what you're thinking is, it doesn't say majority of the city council in attendance, it just says city council, which I think is the same as full membership. No, it's not.
No.
Oh,
No, what this means is vote of the majority of the council. If you only have 5,
Yeah.
as a quorum, you only need 3 to take action.
okay.
You know, so.
I'm fine with that, because I like firing attorneys all the time.
Hey, if you want to get rid of me.
I'm out.
I believe this is fine, to be honest with you, because we had a big issue with the previous attorney's office, and I think it's just really easy to leave this the way it is.
I don't feel like it should say the full.
I think it should match, but that's
Yeah.
just me.
I don't care. I honestly,
But it's another thing for the
whatever you
voters to
guys
vote on
want,
again.
I mean,
It's another thing for the voters to vote on again. Right now, we have like 6 things.
So what are we trying to say, we want to limit it based on how they're gonna vote, or we don't want them to vote on too many things?
Well, that's the thing, that the more things we have, the fewer they're gonna have necessarily, because they'll probably look at it and go.
well, what you're looking at is exactly what Mr. Garza talked about earlier. Let's say this is on the agenda to vote about the attorney. So with the language being the majority, you know, for sure, it has to be a minimum of 4 votes. If there's 3 chickens that don't wanna show up to, you know,
Make the tough decision.
then to make the tough decision and only 5 show up and 3 vote to remove him, it won't be with the majority of the entire, it'll just be those 3, but those other 3 people that didn't show up, they're gonna not show up on purpose, because it's not like they can just magically produce this vote.
Right,
They're gonna have to put it on an agenda or have a special meeting with it on the agenda and then not show up.
that makes sense.
So I get what you're saying, but I think you're gonna end up with that saying, if we put, I don't know,
We haven't even gotten to chapter 6, and this is one of the issues that I have eventually whenever we get there. Which we're not gonna get there right now, but it's just the psychology, sociology. The reality is the charter says yes, no, and how they do it. And by the time I get to the 5th or 6th, whatever, on a list, and I'm just trying to, I guess my concern is I wanna keep the meat where we need the meat at, because as we continue to add more things for voters to vote on, they're gonna start checking yes, and they don't know what they're even voting on. So what are you gonna
No, I
do
think
to
you're,
this?
I give them enough credit. I think that's the case. We should say, let's just cap it at 10 and no more items because they can't handle it.
No,
So
I just
have-
wanna be respectful of what we're adding.
okay,
I have a spreadsheet that I'll send to Peggy to send out to you, and there are priority levels. Is this a high, medium, or low? And so we can put these on that spreadsheet as things that we would like to consider changing. And then as we get toward the end where we actually vote on what to put on the charter, we can say, okay, well, we have 10 high priority. Do we want to add in?
No, I mean, I
something
think everyone else is fine with it.
that's into my mind, we're gonna change what we all feel as a board should change, that.
No, what you're saying is right. I mean, why don't we look at all the stuff that we consider and then decide at the end what the top priorities are gonna be?
I think that's right.
And Mr. Garza, I think this might be a question for you, is would it be possible to say, present to the voters that we would agree that all city positions to be approved or removed require a simple majority, that we could make that as a single line item, and then it goes here, 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 here.
But we
Is that a
haven't changed any of
possibility?
the other
It's a
ones.
possibility.
It's a
You have to look
possibility.
at all the charter provisions,
Right,
and you would have to basically say that the name, city attorney, city manager, city secretary, municipal judge, all require the higher language to reflect hiring and termination would require majority of.
so in the idea of simplification, if we were to do that, then we would just do it in one line.
Each different.
Everyone's the same, everyone's looked at the same as that, that would keep it from being 20 different items. Does that make sense?
Makes great sense, actually, to me.
But really, everyone else seems to be okay with it, so I am too. I mean, we don't need to.
But
I
don't
would
we
never
have
hard
to-
to change it if we're gonna lump it together.
Yeah,
'Cause I hear what they're saying. If you have like 40 things on there, people are just gonna get bored.
but if we're having a
Hold on.
health.
But realistically, but I do like consistency, and I do think that if we change it, it'd be great. I don't wanna skip over these little things just because we want to save room and we don't wanna crowd it. It's still important. It's still, because we're kicking the can down the road and passing it off to someone else to change later. So, I think if we can combine it, that'd be awesome. But I will make sure that my spreadsheet has the priority level, and then I'll put that note in there too for us.
Well, can we just
Yes.
pick that up next time, because I know we're getting close.
You're getting close.
6 minutes.
Is that, I was gonna say, is that something that a small group of us can discuss between them for next week, or is that not necessary?
I'm not comfortable with that because the hiring and firing is a pretty big deal.
Sure.
And laws are not written necessarily to streamline, they're written because of either interpretation or people's input.
Understood.
And in this particular case, that's not a topic that I,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Administrative departments, offices, and agencies, and personnel are the last two at the moment.
I'd recommend we might consider dropping paragraph 3 for city tax collector.
On section 4.06.
Right,
Just 4.05.
I'm sorry.
and you could put that in the general administration cleanup, because the city has not had its own tax collector for many years.
Okay.
And there is no intention of ever getting a tax collector again for the city.
Does it pay well?
No,
We don't have them.
Therein lies the problem.
Okay.
I agree with that.
Yeah, makes sense.
I make a motion to delete section 4.05 subsection 3.
So
I'll second.
like I said,
All in favor? Any opposed? No opposition, passed. Okay. 406.
personnel,
Two,
Yeah,
adopted rules shall provide for the following requirements.
Which one?
No, 4.05.
Still six.
Oh, two.
no, I'm on 05 too.
Going back.
Okay, so at the end of the paragraph, the city manager may with consent of the city council serve as the head of one or more city departments. Should that be something that is a temporary and not a permanent, that they are the city manager and they could be potentially based on this, all of the managers.
They could.
not everyone's a liver.
I mean, they're not gonna wanna be all the managers, but
Yeah.
based
I
on
mean-
this, they could be the manager of every department and the city, or the department head and all of them.
or they could. appoint
Well,
one
of course,
person
we have-
instead of
To
multiple.
be all of them.
We have the
Yeah.
city council making the decision based on their agreement to do it, but also I think it comes down to, are we, has Civil become a large enough city to even bother with changing that?
Because in the past, like I said, 30 years ago, there was only about 3,000 people.
Yeah.
And so the departments, engineering was much smaller, et cetera, et cetera.
In 2004, we only had 5,000 people. We only had 13 employees
Oh,
when I
wow.
got here.
So
Okay.
So I think, are we still at the point that we are small enough that it's still fine?
it's getting bigger.
Right.
So are you proposing that they not be able to appoint themselves, but can appoint someone else as the head of 2 or more departments?
They don't appoint themselves in the city council. With their
Well, with
consent,
the consent, there that's, yeah.
Yeah.
they give us a thumbs up.
Yeah, it's more of a case.
No, wait, department heads?
Yeah,
City manager may, with the consent of council, serve as the head of one or more city department, officer, agencies, or appoint one person instead of 2 or more of them. So if the city manager wanted to appoint police chief to also be fire chief, that would need the consent of the city council
exactly.
based on that.
It's still the city council that says we're good or not.
Is that how it's-
Yeah.
Director Klein is over the planning and engineering department.
It's planning and engineering department. So how it's labeled.
Oh, isn't Craighead over too?
Parks and Recreation.
Mr. Craighead is the parks. Mr. Foos is, public works director, capital projects. And
I thought it was the planning and engineering.
I think the biggest part of this is it's with the consent of the city council.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If those elected officials that we all elect as citizens say, this person can be the head of this department and this department and manage it.
Sure.
Right now, then it is what it is. I don't think it's ever gonna happen because we're getting so large that
Yeah,
everybody's overworked and underpaid right now, so.
we're not dealing with a hiring, interviewing issue, it's just it's filled. We're taking care of.
Okay. That's, you know,
Personnel system, docket rules, there's somebody said they had an issue question on 406 subsection 2.
But that's, I think it's an issue, a budgetary issue, because the staff has a workbook, not a workbook, a,
Personnel policy manual.
yes, that addresses their attendance policy, correct?
Correct.
Is there any deviation from that policy manual to what the council approves that policy manual, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so ultimately, council has to approve any variance.
I know there was some conversation about different positions getting flexible or additional time off that was not necessarily reported as paid time off. It was just kind of given, and I want to make sure that if we need to address that here.
That's
Okay,
an
so there we
that's
go.
a personnel.
That's all I needed to know. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with Jamie, I think the rest of this is, good. You're,
We're 8:30, because of. Yes, ma'am, wave a hand,
Yes, yes.
thank you.
I put something here, I just wanted to make sure, I don't know, I don't really remember what my question was. E, section 4.062E.
plan for annual oral written evaluation based on job description, including. Okay,
Does that include for the city manager? Can we put in there that it needs to be a written?
Next page.
Yeah, it says including evaluation of the city
It says city manager, city secretary,
Municipal
municipal
judge.
city attorney, by the city council.
And that should be, it says oral and written evaluation, so
It
that
says including
means,
evaluation.
including.
Okay.
The contract for the city manager usually talks about the type of evaluation.
okay,
It's just a plan for it, so it may not include all of it, but it's a plan.
so if we wanted to make sure that the contract includes written, that would just be in the contract, we would not put it here.
Correct.
Okay, what about the performance evaluations being made available? Is that a thing?
Public record.
It is, okay.
Once
What
it's-
about-
Once it's completed, you file up a record request, they have no choice.
What about, and this may be completely off base, but what about public input or citizen input for the elected or appointed people, like the city manager, the city, these people on the back, the city manager, city secretary, municipal judge, and city attorney? Is there a way for public input to be considered into the,
Usually that would be a city council.
okay.
You're talking about for input to the evaluation?
Yeah, so like a performance review, you might have a city council who thinks they're doing fine, but you have a group of citizens
Right,
who,
I would think if you had,
I don't know.
I mean, the city could accept complaints, the city does accept complaints on positions, so that if those are
Yeah, I don't think
included in
we
the
should do an
review,
evaluation
it's
of that.
the same thing.
Or like not necessarily personal complaints, but a survey of, is it, nah, I'm just thinking, never mind, ignore me.
Okay, guys,
We're good, let's just.
I move we adjourn for the evening.
Second.
We have a movement in a second,
Bye bye.
all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition?
so the next meeting is the 25th, it'll be over at city council. And it will be, our attorney, Mr. Linder, that will be there, Mr. Garza will not be there the 25th.
That's 2 weeks.
Down already.
Thank you.
And,
My wife's taking me somewhere for my anniversary.
Oh, congratulations.
so we will
You
be
survived,
putting
didn't you?
chapter 5 and 6 on the agenda.
Okay.
Thank you.
How many years?
29.
Oh, wow.
My apologies for missing that.